I'm Kevin Owocki. I'm one of the founders of Gitcoin, and thank you to Juan for inviting me here to talk about retroactive public goods funding, which is a new mechanism that we're experimenting with. And it's a real pleasure to follow you, Andrew, the Drips team, Radical team, and Gitcoin go way back. I had dinner with LA and his co-founder back in 2017, and we were trying to find ways, the 3-3 between the two projects, and looking forward to continuing to work with you. And hopefully really looking forward to working with the Filecoin ecosystem. Obviously, IPFS has been a huge part of the architectures that I've built over the years. And I think that y'all are teaching us how to build a decentralized ecosystem. So also looking for the 3-3 between Gitcoin and Filecoin. And so I'm going to spend, I think I have like 10 minutes to talk about retroactive public goods funding on Gitcoin, and then we'll break into questions from there. So high level, the meme that we're promoting in 2024 is that grants equals growth. We are funding public goods in these ecosystems, not only because we want to see the builders funded, but because it's a sustainable competitive advantage for your ecosystem to fund public goods. So I kind of think about Gitcoin as sitting in between these treasuries, which have tens of millions of dollars or sometimes billions of dollars, and the public goods that they want to see be built in their ecosystem. And so depending on your ecosystem, that can mean tooling, liquidity, virtual machines, tokenomics, staking, security, business development in your ecosystem. And I see our job as innovating the most precise and scalable capital allocation mechanisms for Web3 ecosystems to achieve growth in these core tools that they want to see for their ecosystem. Gitcoin has so far done $56 million worth of funding, mostly for the Ethereum ecosystem, but we're starting to do it for other ecosystems. And that's been primarily through quadratic funding thus far. Has anyone participated in our quadratic funding rounds so far? All right, a couple hands. Also just checking to see who's listening. But we're actually pivoting to be a multi-mechanism ecosystem. So I think that following the Unix philosophy of doing one thing and doing it well, but making it interoperable with other types of tooling, we kind of see quadratic funding as being one tool that's good at doing one thing. And I think that's democratic capital allocation. So quadratic funding, if you're not familiar, is you put a matching pool out to your community and you let your community fund what matters to them, and then you match their contributions based off of the number of contributors, not the amount that was funded by those contributors. And that's a really great way of funding what matters to everyday rank and file members of your ecosystem. So it leverages the wisdom and the madness of crowds. And so that's been sort of our core through Gitcoin 1.0. And as Gitcoin 2.0, this latest epoch of Gitcoin evolves, we're evolving into direct grants, which is basically just like a much simpler mechanism than quadratic funding, and sort of like in some ways like the gateway drug for getting people into doing capital allocation, into doing grants programs on Gitcoin. And on top of direct grants, we have milestone-based payouts. Basically, you can set up a Gitcoin grant and add a milestone to it. And if the team meets that milestone according to a review committee, then they're going to be able to get the payout for that milestone. And so that's direct grants. Direct grants and quadratic funding are both available on Gitcoin Grant Stack, which is the tool that you can deploy a grants round for your community onto any EVM-based network and trustlessly manage the grants program, leveraging all the properties of the EVM, corruption resistance, transparency, seeing where the funds are, et cetera, and building up reputation on chain. And so the last mechanism that I want to talk about, and we'll spend the rest of the talk on retroactive public goods funding, is retroactive public goods funding. So basically pioneered by Vitalik and the Optimism ecosystem over the last 24 months, based off of the idea that it's easier to judge whether a project is going to have impact after it has had that impact than speculating beforehand. So basically, Optimism has pioneered this badge holder-based system in which you can evaluate which public goods are good. Has anyone in the audience been a badge holder? Okay, I know I have at least Carl in there because we talk a lot about badge holder-based capital allocation. And myself and a couple of my team members are actually the ones who built the voting interface for Optimism Retroactive Public Goods Funding Round 3 and allowed the badge holders to vote on which projects they thought were good in that ecosystem. And Optimism has kindly allowed us to white label that tool and to make it available to anyone who wants to run a retroactive public goods funding round for their community. So you can do retroactive public goods funding on Gitcoin Grant Stack, which is sort of Gitcoin's tool for doing all these kind of things. I think of it as like a Swiss Army knife for doing capital allocation. But we've also got this tool called EasyRetroPGF.xyz, which makes it easy to do a Optimism style retroactive public goods funding round. And so just want to gut check with you, Juan and Tom, that we wanted to talk about RetroPGF today. Okay, cool. All right. Well, sure. Cool. Yeah. I like to just kind of like put this menu in front of a customer and say like, which one do you want to order before I go too deep down one of them. So just wanted to gut check that real quick. Okay, so EasyRetroPGF.xyz, it allows you to do an Optimism style retroactive public goods funding round a la RetroPGF round 3. They're going to be announcing their designs for round 4 very soon, and I expect that we're going to bid on that work and have a voting application for round 4 and coming up soon. But just for the sake of clarity, what I'm about to show you is RetroPGF round 3 designs. And you can bet dollars to donuts that Gitcoin's going to be, as the space evolves, and it is an evolving space as we figure out how to do capital allocation, that Gitcoin's going to have other types of funding mechanisms available to you. So I'm going to give you like a 5-minute overview of RetroPGF, EasyRetroPGF. But if you're interested in learning more, there is a training program and pilot cohort that we're putting together in which we have 6 modules about how to do everything on RetroPGF, from scoping your RetroPGF funding round, understanding how to select badge holders, creating an application process and impact evaluation strategies, doing nominations and voting, doing KYC and payouts, and then just mastering the process over time from there. So we're going to try to compress all of this information into 5 minutes, but if you're someone who's serious about grants and you want to learn more, I can send you the videos and the notes from these campaigns, and we'll go into a lot more detail. Okay, so EasyRetroPGF.xyz, if you just type that into your browser, you'll be taken to the GitHub, which is the primary source of truth for running RetroPGF rounds. Let me zoom it in a little bit for you so that you can see what it is. Basically, on the GitHub, you can get access to the Telegram group, which is everyone else who's running EasyRetroPGF rounds. I think we've got a couple $1 million worth of capital and a handful of other DAOs that are figuring it out alongside you. Sometimes that's a good resource to be able to talk to other program managers about RetroPGF. You can click a demo, which is what I'm going to spend most of the time on in the rest of the talk. And then down here in the documentation, there is setup and deployment instructions for EasyRetroPGF.xyz. So you can host your own using Versal. You don't need Gitcoin to run it. It's something that runs permissionlessly. You just set a couple configuration variables. You can deploy your own instance of this tool. And then once you've done that, you can add projects to the tool. So basically soliciting to the Filecoin ecosystem who wants to be in a RetroPGF round, and then approving the projects that you think are a good fit for the round. And then the next step is creating badge holders, which are basically the people in your ecosystem that are responsible for deciding capital allocation to your ecosystem. So giving someone a badge is like saying, I'm going to allow you to allocate FIL to the projects in this ecosystem. And then from there, the next stage a RetroPGF round goes into is voting. So basically voting between the badge holders about which projects they want to see allocated capital. And then from there, there's tallying the results and actually doing payouts. So I'm going to get into the tool and just kind of give you a sense of what it looks like, and then we can break into Q&A from there. So if you just click this View Demo button right here, you can see the tool. And you can see that this is a tool that is branded EasyRetroPGF.xyz, but it is a couple lines of code to override this with your own logo and your own color scheme. I'm assuming there'll be a Filecoin logo up in the top left if you were to actually do this. Okay, so this is the project view for a campaign that is already live. You can see in the top left right here that voting ends in 3 days, 4 hours, and 37 minutes, and that I have begun assembling a ballot on kev.eth, which is my EOA account that has 3 projects in it so far. So this has got a lot of projects that were in the Optimism RetroPGF round, Beacon Chain, Bankless Academy, Bankless DAO Turkish, and you can imagine that these were various projects in the Filecoin ecosystem instead of the Optimism ecosystem. And the other thing that you should imagine here is that in the token you'll be allocating is FIL, not OP, as you're voting. So basically, the way that this tool works is that you can browse across all of the projects that are in the round, and then you can click on a button in order to add them to your ballot. And then once you have done that, you can allocate a certain amount of FIL based off of how good you as a badge holder think that project is. When you've finally gotten to a place in which you think that your ballot is in a good place and you want to submit your ballot, you can go and click this submit ballot button. That'll give you a message that you can sign in order to submit your ballot to a centralized server. There is no gas fees for submitting ballots, and after 18 rounds of Gitcoin grants, I wish that we could invent a gasless voting mechanism for QF as well. But this is stored right now on a centralized server. The reason that we're doing that is that RetroPGF votes are private. So we're working on doing zero knowledge, voting in the future, probably for RetroPGF round 4, but for round 3, it's just a message signature that gets stored in a database that whoever deploys the instance is going to control and is going to be able to take a look at. And that's what enables the votes to be tallied up and to be paid out from there. So that's EasyRetroPGF.xyz. There are other demos that I could show you as well. If we go back to the GitHub, you can see that the ability to create badge holders and to approve applications or other things that we can play with. But would encourage you to check out the videos that are just straight on the GitHub repository which walk through how to do all of those things. And maybe we'll spend the rest of the time on Q&A. And I'll just zoom us out before we do Q&A and just present this menu to you again. These are the mechanisms that Gitcoin offers as of 2024, but we're working on other frontier mechanisms for allocating capital to your ecosystem. I envision a plurality of capital allocation mechanisms in these ecosystems, in which each of these mechanisms do one thing and do them well. And we're kind of here to give you a Swiss Army knife to use the right tool for the job for the campaign that you're running. So that's Gitcoin 2.0. That's RetroPGF. Happy to take any questions from here. All right. Carl was going to clap. Yeah. Thanks, Carl. Glad someone else did. Any questions? Go ahead, Carl.
I guess, the person who's orchestrating all this, what's the time commitment? What's the profile of that person? Is this a full-time thing they're doing? Is this what we do? So weekend is how much work is actually required badges?
Yeah. So how much time is required to run an easy RetroPGF round? And I feel like that word easy is doing a lot of work because there is a lot of design space here to traverse. I mean, it's something that if you were to really do it very thoughtlessly, you could click through the deployment steps and add all the badge holders and run a campaign within a couple hours. Now, most of the time associated with doing it well is making sure that you're thoughtfully walking through how to do the capital allocation, how to select badge holders, how you want to scope the round. And so the hard part is not the technology. The hard part is asking those questions and building consensus within your organization to do it. And the amount of consensus that you need, I think, scales with the amount of capital that you want to do. So the first campaign that Filecoin runs with us, or any partner runs with us, I'd advise doing between $25,000 and $100,000, and that's just like the training wheels pilot round, just to get a feel for the muscle memory of the tool. And you're gonna get you're gonna put weeks of effort into building consensus around that. But then it gets easier every subsequent round as you're only iterating on what's new as opposed to what you did the first time around. So yeah, a range from several hours to several weeks, depending on how much you care about making sure that capital allocation is done thoughtfully. Good question. Go ahead.
This might be covered in your definition of experts of how that part of the mechanism works, but I've seen a lot of, like, when you have communities and voting, you end up, how do you avoid the situation where people are voting all the projects that they best, voting, corralling around their friends?
Yeah.
Yes, kind of popularity from testing rather than objective assessing them.
Yeah, so we're primarily focused with EasyRetroPGF on just copying what Optimism does. So I'll just tell you what Optimism does. And then if you have a reason to deviate from that, you can. So basically what Optimism does is you're not allowed to vote on a project that you have an economic upside in. So basically there was an instance in which someone from the Protocol Guild voted for the Protocol Guild and they ejected them from the badge holder set for doing that. And so that's the best thing that we've thought of now. I mean, that person protested, hey, I've got less than 1% of this. And obviously the Protocol Guild is great. So like they appealed, but I think like the no quid pro quo is a pretty good rule for badge holders to put in front of them. But you could configure that and customize it depending on how your ecosystem is set up. More questions? I don't know who to choose. Go ahead.
Are the votes private or public?
The votes are private right now. You could publicize them if you want. Yeah, go ahead. Good. Yeah, so the goal, I should have covered this in my presentation, but actually I've got a visual for this. So the goal of doing RetroPGF, I think of as is like spinning this ecosystem growth flywheel where the DAO is releasing money into a funding round, which is creating value for your ecosystem, which creates a bigger DAO treasury. And, you know, I think we all wish that crypto worked like this instead of being so speculative, but I think over time, fundamentals will matter more than speculation. And to actually answer your question, the goal is to not run one of these and be done with it. The goal is to run them every 3 to 6 months. And over time, the builders in your ecosystem can use this to staff their team, to pay their mortgage. And yeah, like a one-time pilot is really good for figuring out how to do it, but the goal is to run these on a continuous time basis.
But the given project might go through the funding pool.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely. And that's a feature. Go ahead.
So one of the things that was really interesting from your presentation, I thought, was this idea that the mechanisms about optimism for life, they do something that's like sort of follow the life of a certain modifications. Easier in the space, and it's not seen I've heard before, but it's super interesting. How much do you think? And it sounds like you guys with EasyRetroPGF intend to follow that pattern so that like whatever, or I mean, I guess the question, well, like if optimism around 4 changes kind of the mechanism, you plan to follow that pretty strictly, or you get a sense that you or others who are building implementations of RetroPGF will be willing to go away from optimism's design and certain future rounds if there are sort of things you want.
Yeah.
Like how much do you think the space of implementation will follow their mechanism with tradition?
Yes.
That's kind of
Great question. The question was like, how much are we going to just follow what Optimism does? I think a lot about like in software, there's this meme of convention versus configuration, which is like convention is like using an Apple product where it just works out of the box and it's got intelligent defaults. And then there's configuration, which is like, you know, the Linux people that want to configure everything about their computer. And I think that right now we're seeing a lot of people just wanting to copy what Optimism does because they're the biggest and most successful RetroPGF round. And I think that will continue to be a thing in the future. But as we build the muscle of coordination mechanisms and we start to explore this design space, I think that we're going to like broaden the aperture of configuration from there. And I'm really excited to I want to live in a world in 3 to 5 years where there's like 10 great public goods funding mechanisms. They all complement each other and do one thing and do them well. And of course, Gitcoin grants and EasyRetroPGF and drips will all be in, you know, we're all in that vision together. So the answer is I don't know, but what we're planning on doing is like this code is the nice thing about the way we architected this is like it's completely permissionless. Like if Gitcoin decides to move on and do optimism retroactive public goods funding round 4 style rounds for most of it, you can still fork this and run it yourself without us. So it kind of leaves like breadcrumbs for people to come along and do it in their ecosystem. Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's all the time I have. And thank you so much. Looking forward to hopefully working with the Filecoin ecosystem. Public goods are good.